Hey, what is up, everybody? Jeremy here. And guys, I'm very interested in the conversation we're going to have today as we have Diane Spiva with us today. She's a board-certified nurse practitioner with over 30 years of clinical experience working with primary care, pediatrics, and hospital medicine. And we're going to be taking a look at a lot of the issues men deal with around testosterone and your health. So, Diane, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy. I'm glad to be here.
So I want to know first and foremost, you're working in a very specialized field now in men's health. How did you get involved in that area, and how did you start specializing in that area?
Oh, well, my background is, I worked a little bit of everywhere. I've been doing this
Sure.
for a long time. Over 18 years of advanced practice nursing, at first as a nurse anesthetist and then in women's health. And then when I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, that's for lack of finding a better job, I decided to do urology and men's health and learn about men, and became very passionate about that. So my experience here for more than 5 years now has been in men's health and urology and men's health.
Mm-hmm. I will say I love Atlanta, Georgia, by the way. I'm trying to remember the name of that restaurant we always go to. It's something Varsity, I think. Yeah. Oh, my gosh, the hot dog place.
Yep,
it's incredible.
Varsity, yep. It's very popular.
Oh, my gosh. Well, Diane, I'm really interested to talk about this today because I feel like, number one, it's a difficult issue for a lot of men, but it's a really important issue for a lot of men that we kind of just forget about. And I guess just first and foremost, before we kind of dive in today, why do you think there's so much difficulty in talking about testosterone and men's issues? I feel like there's a lot of actual struggle in that, at least from my viewpoint.
I think that people don't really realize, first of all, what the symptoms are of low testosterone. So it's not something that just comes to mind. They think that's something that only affects the very elderly, and that's not true. Today it used to be that it was about 40% of men between the ages of 30 and 70 were thought to have low testosterone, but more and more we're getting 20 and 30-year-olds in with that low testosterone. We live in a more stressful era, and that's affecting people's ability to get out there and do those things to help keep their testosterone levels up.
Yeah, that's interesting given those numbers. Is it rising like substantially, or are we able to track it better, and maybe that's why we know more? I'm curious because that sounds like that's pretty extreme.
It is pretty extreme, and actually it's probably even higher than that. We've noticed specifically, since 2019, 2020 with the pandemic, that more and more people are coming in. Maybe they're being able to read more on it and they're hearing more about it, but testosterone affects men in a very major way. It's their overall health. So whenever they're feeling lack of energy and they don't have, they have a decreased libido, they're putting on weight that they can't get rid of. Testosterone is usually plays a role in that. So actually, those numbers are probably higher than we're getting right now from the studies.
Wow. That's really interesting because I'm sure there's guys out there that don't want to broach the subject and stuff too. So I'm sure that also affects the numbers. I want to kind of start out with as well because I think not everybody has a good idea of what testosterone does to the body. I think when we hear that, we think bodybuilders, we think these big guys working out, or we have the other side of it, like you mentioned, somebody that is older and maybe is struggling with that. So I guess let's kind of start with the basic. And what is the role of testosterone actually in the body? Because I think we have a lot of ideas on what it is, but I don't know if some of those are true and some of those aren't true.
Sure. And men and women both have testosterone. Obviously, it's more important in men, but it's important for overall health. It plays a role in muscle health and wellness, in fat distribution, and in it's cardioprotective. So when you don't have enough, you end up having struggles in those areas. And
so I guess in
sperm production too, fertility.
Well, I guess in terms of like symptoms of that, like how do you know, like what things are happening with your body that you may say, there's this isn't some other thing, this is actually testosterone. Like how would you be able to determine that?
Usually, the first symptoms that men usually exhibit that they present with is lack of energy. They're just tired all the time. They may have some moodiness, anxiety, depression, maybe some insomnia. But the biggest one that actually seems to play a call to action for them is they're putting on weight and they can't seem to lose that weight.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting because I feel like the others, you could kind of attribute that to something else, right? Like, maybe my diet's not good. Maybe I'm too stressed. Maybe maybe my adrenal glands are fatigued, whatever it may be. So the diet thing is actually the thing that brings a lot of people in then.
It's that inability to lose weight, and they understand the consequences of that in their overall health. We're we're getting smarter and smarter, and through education, they're realizing, I've got to do something before this gets out of hand. And a decreased libido is another one of those, and maybe even erectile dysfunction.
I'm curious in terms of actually researching those things. How do most men go about finding a solution to that? I'm curious. Like I'm sure you talk to a lot of men. You've had a lot of conversations. Like what's kind of their first actions they do to try to find information?
I encourage them to look it up, to make sure that if they go to the internet and they look it up, to be sure that they go to reputable sites. And I generally go with those main teaching hospitals that we as healthcare providers use as for evidence-based studies, and that's going to be usually Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Massachusetts General, those type of clinics, and just kind of read on what their symptoms are. Looking at those symptoms, and if they have more than 2 or 3 of those symptoms, more than they need to go to their physician or a physician and be worked up. Obviously a men's health specialist specializes in identifying that and treating that in a better way, in my opinion. So just doing the research and seeing what's out there.
So let me ask you this, because to me, obviously we know there's some solutions out there. There's some that are the right ones, there's some that aren't the right ones, and I'm curious. One of the big things I've heard about is this idea of testosterone replacement therapy. If that's the case, when and how do we pursue that, right? When do we know if maybe it's not bad enough yet, or maybe it is bad enough? And if that's the case, what does the therapy actually look like?
So good question. So I usually it's not you that would be making that decision. It would be your healthcare provider, and it would involve a workup. So usually that'd be to go see your whoever the provider is that you seek evaluation with, and they're going to do a full evaluation, because it's important to kind of look at underlying cause for those symptoms as well. So that would usually involve some lab work being drawn, and we treat obviously people, not numbers, but we want to see what those numbers are to be able to evaluate that, and depending on what those numbers are would help us to identify what treatment options would be best for you.
What's a good number? What's a bad number? And I guess what's that scale look like?
So that scale is 264 to 916. It's one of the widest.
That's broad.
Yeah, it's very broad.
That's really broad.
Yeah, and it was developed back in the mid 1950s, and it's never been updated. So that's the one problem that we have in men's health right now is it doesn't really capture everybody. It was based upon a very small study of men that were in their mid 50s in Pennsylvania. Actually, they were farmers, so it didn't really evaluate any other age groups, or it's a different lifestyle. We know lifestyle actually contributes to that decrease in that testosterone level. So when somebody comes in, if they have symptoms, if they fall, sometimes I look at that number and say if a 40-year-old comes in and his hormone levels are below 500, and he is symptomatic, then he has testicular hypofunction. He is not having enough testosterone to meet what his needs are for his age. So it's a balancing act in looking at those numbers, and I would call that suboptimal in his case, and offer therapy and lifestyle recommendations to see if we could improve his quality of life.
So you may have to correct me on my pronunciation on this one, but you said testicular dysfunction, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Or hypofunction.
Hypofunction. Okay, so I guess from that standpoint, how does that work? Does it at a certain point the body just stops functioning as well with age, or maybe environment or whatever it is? What is that, and how does that occur?
So it's because of so the brain is sending messages to the testicles to make testosterone levels. So that's your luteinizing hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone. It's about reproduction when you're younger. That tends to be not as necessary as we get older, but it also helps to maintain bone mineral density, and helps you to maintain muscle mass so that you burn more you burn fat, so you can handle eating and not putting on weight. So
Right.
whenever you have that decrease in that function, you actually it can be symptomatic, and it's going to be for a reason. That can be for many different reasons. A lot of times it's stress. It might be that you're not sleeping well. Anything that disrupts that circadian cycle. If you work nights, notoriously people that work nights have low testosterone. So there's many, not eating the right things, not doing physical exercise frequently. Those are all things that contribute to testosterone being adequate.
Well, Diane, I'm not sleeping well right now, but it's because I have a 1.5-year-old that only has half of her teeth in, and she's letting me know very strongly about it every night.
Can only imagine.
But oh my gosh, like so we've been started doing this thing to help with her teeth and at least handle the pain. The poor kid. But one of the things I'm interested in, because I don't know if this is associated with it or not, but does hair loss have anything to do with testosterone, or is that a totally different thing?
No, it does have something to do with it. So a lot of times when your testosterone's going down, your dihydrotestosterone is going up, and that it's called it's andropause. You're actually having an androgenic alopecia, a loss of hair. So that's definitely related to testosterone as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I guess I know this isn't the direction we're going, but I'm really interested now. So I guess in balancing those two out, does that help with hair loss, hurt with hair loss, or is that kind of once it's over, it's done type of thing?
Well, obviously, low testosterone can lead to that hair loss. So too can treatment with testosterone replacement
I've seen that.
therapy.
I was a bodybuilder in my 20s, and I've seen a lot of my friends that were doing things they shouldn't be, like losing their hair. So yeah. I've seen that part of it.
So we usually recommend some type of it's called DHT, or dihydrotestosterone blocker. They obviously there's prescription drugs for that. Propecia, or finasteride is the name of it. The problem with that prescription medication is 40% of men on it have erectile dysfunction, so tend to shy a little bit away from that. But there are natural supplements like stinging nettle or Nettles Max that help to block that DHT and help to kind of reduce those symptoms.
Well, I guess getting us back to testosterone therapy, and I apologize. Sometimes if you put a rabbit trail out there, I will chase it sometimes.
Oh, it's a good question. It was a great question, actually.
So, because there's a lot of I guess one of the problems is I think there's a lot of myth out there, and there's a lot of what's actually true. And I think some of it is finding out what's true and what's myth. And I think, so to me, that's really, really important in handling that. But I guess in terms of looking at testosterone therapy, when does a practitioner decide if you're a candidate for that? And if you are, what does an actual protocol look like for that? Is this something you're doing weekly, every day, once a year? What does that look like?
So what I would do as a practitioner is going to look very different than what insurance might say. Insurance is going to want you to be below 300 and on 2 consecutive tests before they would consider paying for any type of hormone replacement therapy. And if your insurance covers that, it's not something. It's one of those things they're behind the times on there. They don't cover that much. But whenever, from me as a provider, if you have those symptoms and you have something to, you're in that level, but you have symptoms of that, it can't hurt for me to put you on a low dose testosterone and raise your levels closer to where you were when you were 18, 19, 20 years old, which was 11 to 1200.
Wow.
So nowhere near that scale of 264 to 916. So
that's wild to me, because even in the last 20 years they've changed the Richter scale, what we rate an earthquake on. I think it's time to take a look at this scale.
Yep, and they haven't done it for our men.
So that's really interesting. So 1200, that's so it's off the scale at that point.
Yeah, it's when you as young men, and it kind of probably depends on the background you grew up in. If you lived in a secure family and household and didn't have a lot of worries, then your testosterone was about 11 or 1200, and you were able to eat anything you want, not put on any weight. You could miss sleep, and it didn't touch anything. But as we go through each decade of our life, we start to kind of stack on stressors. We have to pay bills. We may have relationships or kids and things. We have more added responsibilities and stresses that start to add on, and those actually seem to impact that testosterone level. So when we look at replacing that, testosterone, it's more, again, we treat a person, not a number, but
Hmm.
it's our responsibility to always take into consideration the risks versus the benefits of any kind of treatment that we should offer.
So I guess in terms of that, and I do want to, I guess, come back around to protocols in a second, but one of the things you mentioned there is the idea of, and this isn't the first time I've heard this. I've heard this a few times about insurance and like what they cover and what they don't cover versus these treatments. So they see, I guess, below 300 is non-optimal to them. But I guess like for a normal person, you mentioned at 18, you're probably around 1200. What's like a normal optimal range to be walking around like feeling okay? Versus like they're saying like to me it sounds like at 300 even if you're not below that you're still going to have a lot of these symptoms and like
Oh,
they're saying hey that's
absolutely, you will
cool.
be. So, especially if you're younger. So, if I have many 25-year-olds that come in and they're in their mid 20s and they just have no energy. They're putting on weight. They just don't have the energy to get up and go, and they're struggling to keep their jobs and to move on with their lives, and they may be even having some sexual uh, issues, decreased libido or erectile dysfunction. And so we obviously are going to treat the person and symptoms and see if those improve. And usually they do. But if that 25-year-old, if he's below 500, he's symptomatic. Now,
Mm.
a 50 or 60-year-old, he may not be symptomatic at 500 or 600. So that's why it would be normal for him, but not for somebody who's 20s or 30s.
Wow, that's very interesting. And I guess in terms of like protocol, I kind of took you on a little bit of a tangent, but I guess like looking at protocols, like what does a treatment protocol look like, and how long are you on something like that?
So, good question. There's obviously we want to discuss the things that we can do to naturally bring your testosterone up, and that's going to be
Sure.
lifestyle changes. So, recommending having being healthy heart, so increasing your cardio exercise, but also to have some strength and endurance training, so low weight, high rep, with some consistency, but eating the right foods. Or we tend to be a fast-paced generation, so those fast foods aren't offering a lot of nutritional support. It's important to have plenty of protein in your diet and not be overeating. And then we also talk about how important it is to get plenty of sleep. Sleep is
Mm.
way underrated. So if you're only sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night, more than likely you are having problems with your testosterone. So we encourage, you know, developing a sleep routine where you can actually be able to get more rest and see if that improves your symptoms. But if that's not helping, or you've already tried those things, or you don't feel like you're gonna be having luck in that, we know that all those things also lead to your testosterone dropping. So we're okay with initiating a low dose testosterone replacement therapy for a finite period of time. Usually, our first goal is always going to be that 30-day period. We do a full set of labs after 30 days just to see, how things are going and see if you have any improvement in your symptoms, and then reevaluate you moving forward from there.
Looking at environmental causes, I'm curious because you mentioned all those different things that we're looking at: your sleep, we're looking at your diet, your stuff like that. I guess have you looked at like plastics and things like that as well? Because I've heard, once again, I'm trying to separate the myth from what's true here, but I've heard like some of the chemicals in plastics can also be a big like thing driving testosterone down. I don't know if you've heard that.
I have heard that. I'm still, there's still a lot of research going on that, so we're
Right.
watching that closely. There's also, a lot of research going on right now with all the computers and the phones and the blue screen, and the effects of
Yeah.
that on fertility and and testosterone and sperm production. So we know that it affects those genitals. So encouraging men to not put their phone in their pockets, and at nighttime using a screen filter, just to reduce that blue screen.
Yeah, my wife has gotten me to stop putting my phone in my pocket because she showed me a video about it and it kind of freaked me out. So I totally understand that. So Diane, you're actually here today on behalf of the Men's Wellness League. So could you tell us a little bit about the Men's Wellness League and what they're doing to help this whole situation?
Yeah, so Nuberty is a clinic that is concierge medicine. In essence, they help to develop personalized treatment plans for men only. that focus on their overall health, wellness. That includes sexual, hormone, developing, good eating habits. We do weight loss. Just anything that helps to keep that gentleman in good physical shape.
Very cool. Well, Diane, where can we find out more about you guys?
You can go to www.menswellnessleague.com, and if they go there, if they'll push, there's a select schedule a phone call, and somebody will call them back, or they can reach us by calling us at www.menswellnessleague.com and click schedule a call, and somebody will call you back, or you can call us directly by calling us at 404-480-5229.
Very cool. Well, Diane Spiva, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
No, thank you so much, Jeremy. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking with you again in the future.
All right, thank you.